James receives HOA 911-style confrontation letter at mailbox. I never imagined that buying a quiet cabin deep in the pines would end with flashing lights, angry neighbors, and a police officer saluting me in front of the entire community. But here I am, telling you exactly how it happened. From the very beginning, I wanted nothing more than peace, a break from the constant buzz of military life, a place where I could finally just breathe. After decades of serving my country, I thought I'd earned that. What I didn't know was that one woman, one so-called concerned neighbor, was about to turn that dream into a full-blown nightmare. Her name, Karen. And believe me, she lived up to it in every possible way. It all started on my very first week at the cabin. I was still unpacking, still adjusting to the slower rhythm of life. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke, the kind of place where silence feels heavy, grounding, almost sacred. But that peace shattered the moment Karen laid eyes on me. She didn't knock, she didn't introduce herself, she didn't even bother with small talk. Instead, she marched across the gravel driveway, arms folded, lips pursed so tightly you'd think she was holding in poison. "You don't belong here," she said flatly. At first, I thought I misheard her. I looked around at the wide-open land, the small collection of cabins scattered among the trees, and then back at her. "Excuse me?" I asked, trying to keep my tone even. She held up a printed sheet of neighborhood rules. Not official HOA paperwork, not government regulations, just something she had typed up, highlighted, and waved in my face like gospel. "This is a family community. We don't allow people like you wandering around unsupervised. My son saw you outside last night and got scared." I was stunned. "Scared?" "I was stacking firewood," I said. But Karen's eyes narrowed, and that was the moment I realized this wasn't about firewood. This was about power, about control, and about someone who thought she could bully me into packing up and leaving, without a fight. I brushed it off at first. I'd dealt with worse, after all. But when she called the sheriff just 2 days later, claiming I was trespassing on my own land, I knew this wasn't going to be a one-time incident. What I didn't know, not yet, was that every step she took to humiliate me was actually digging her own grave. Because eventually, the day would come when the flashing blue lights returned to that quiet cabin driveway. But this time, it wouldn't be Karen in control. This time, the officer would step out of his car, look me dead in the eye, and salute. "Major General," he said. And in that moment, Karen's world collapsed. James, 60s, dignified, strong build, casual flannel shirt, weathered but calm face, standing outside a rustic pinewood cabin at dusk, carrying a stack of firewood, forest in background, warm cabin lights glowing softly inside. When I first arrived at the cabin, it felt like stepping into another lifetime. The smell of pine needles, the crisp mountain air, the sound of birds replacing the endless ringing of telephones and sharp chatter of military command. For once, silence wasn't a threat. It was a gift. I'd spent decades being told where to be, what to do, who to trust. And now, finally, I had land that was mine. I built a fire, unpacked my boxes, and promised myself I wouldn't let anything disturb this peace. But the thing about peace is, it only takes one person to break it. Karen was that person. She lived in the cabin nearest mine, a gaudy thing with solar-powered garden gnomes, wind chimes that never stopped, and a porch full of plastic flowers. She had a teenage son, maybe 16 or 17, who mostly kept to himself. Quiet, polite when I caught glimpses of him. He wasn't the problem. She was. The first few times I saw her, she didn't say a word, just stared. If I waved, she didn't wave back. If I nodded, she turned away. That kind of hostility you can brush off. Some folks just don't know how to be neighborly. But soon, the stares turned into whispers, the whispers into accusations, and the accusations into action. Karen, early 50s, sharp features, short blonde bob, pastel cardigan, holding a clipboard with community rules stapled on it, standing angrily at the edge of James's gravel driveway, pointing toward the cabin. Her teenage son is in the background, awkward, looking down. It started with that so-called rule sheet. She came storming over while I was splitting logs, holding that clipboard like it was the law of the land. "This is a family area," she said again, her voice loud enough for her son to hear from the porch. "My boy saw you outside last night walking near the tree line. He doesn't feel safe with strangers around." I wanted to laugh. Strangers? I owned this cabin, paid for it with the sweat of years in service. If anything, she was the stranger. At least to me. Still, I tried to keep my cool. "Ma'am, I'm just stacking firewood," I told her. "Nothing more. I bought this place fair and square." But her eyes told me it wasn't about what I did. It was about what she thought I represented. Maybe it was the military haircut I never quite let go of. Maybe it was the way I carried myself. Or maybe it was just that I didn't fall in line, under her authority. From that day on, it was clear. Karen wasn't just a neighbor. She was an enemy in disguise. And though I didn't know it yet, this petty hostility was only the opening shot of a much bigger battle, one that would bring cops, sirens, and an ending no one in that community would ever forget. James, sitting at a wooden kitchen table inside his rustic cabin, looking at a stack of mail full of HOA-style violation letters, his face calm but slightly weary, a coffee mug beside him, dim cabin light overhead. The first official strike came, in the mail. At least, that's what Karen wanted me to think. A thick envelope stamped "Community Notice" in bold red letters sat in my mailbox one morning. Inside, fines, warnings, alleged violations of neighborhood rules I'd never even heard of. Apparently, my cabin's porch light was too bright, my firewood stack was unsightly, and, get this, my American flag, proudly hung by the door, was not regulation size. At first, I thought it was some cruel joke, but as the letters kept coming, week after week, I realized Karen wasn't joking. She had made herself judge, jury, and executioner of this so-called community. The fines weren't small either. $50 for the porch light, $100 for unauthorized landscaping, $200 for disturbing the peace, whatever that meant. She was inventing rules, inflating penalties, and stuffing my mailbox with threats. It was harassment, plain and simple. Karen in a neighborhood meeting room, fluorescent lights, folding chairs, whiteboard behind her, standing at the front with her clipboard, lecturing a small group of neighbors, some nodding, others looking uncomfortable. Of course, she didn't stop with letters. Karen started holding community meetings in the recreation hall, gatherings that looked more like kangaroo courts than friendly neighborhood chats. She stood at the front of the room with that same clipboard, rattling off my supposed crimes. He doesn't mow his lawn evenly. He burns firewood at night, creating smoke that drifts toward homes. He looks suspicious walking near the woods. Some neighbors nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably. Nobody spoke up in my defense. Why? Would they? Karen had a way of turning whispers into weapons, and anyone who stood against her risked becoming her next target. I could feel the walls closing in, not because I was guilty of anything, but because gossip spreads faster than truth. James outside during the day, wearing work gloves, trying to repair a wooden fence post while Karen stands on her porch in the background with arms crossed, glaring. I tried to ignore her. I really did. I fixed the fence. I adjusted the porch. Light. I even replanted part of my garden, just so she couldn't accuse me of unauthorized plants. But no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. Karen didn't want compliance. She wanted control. One evening, as I hammered a loose fence, post back into place, I caught her staring at me from her porch. arms folded, jaw tight, eyes sharp as knives. She wasn't watching to make sure I followed the rules. She was watching to make sure I knew she was watching. That kind of surveillance seeps under your skin. Every movement feels judged. Every step feels dangerous. But I wasn't about to let her break me. A tense evening scene. Flashing police lights wash over the cabin as a sheriff's car pulls up. James stands calmly on his porch, arms crossed, while Karen gestures dramatically to the officer, pointing at James. The breaking point came one Friday night. I just finished chopping wood when I saw the red and blue lights bouncing off the trees. A sheriff's car rolled up my driveway. Karen was right behind it, waving her arms like she was signaling an emergency landing. "He's trespassing," she shouted before the deputy even got out of the car. "He doesn't belong here. He's scaring my son." I stood there in disbelief. "This is my land," I said, calm as ever. The deputy looked between us, clearly annoyed. "Ma'am, this man owns the property. We've been through this before." Karen's face twisted, but she didn't back down. "Well, then arrest him. For harassment. For intimidation. For—" She scrambled, searching for anything that would stick. The deputy shook his head. "Ma'am, there's no crime here. Go home." But Karen didn't hear reason. She didn't want reason. She wanted victory. And when she didn't get it that night, she decided to escalate. Karen's teenage son, 16-17, thin build, hoodie, awkward posture, sitting alone on their porch at dusk, looking conflicted and uneasy, while Karen paces in the background with her phone pressed to her ear. Her son became her next weapon. The boy wasn't bad, quiet, respectful when she wasn't around, but under her influence he became another pawn in her crusade. She told him I was dangerous, that men like me couldn't be trusted, that if he ever saw me outside, he should call her immediately. Soon, every time I stepped outside, I caught the boy staring, phone in hand. It wasn't his fault. He was just a kid, trapped under his mother's paranoia. But it was clear. Karen wasn't going to stop until she pushed me out or destroyed me. What she didn't realize was this. The higher she built her tower of lies, the harder it would fall when the truth came crashing down. And trust me, that crash was coming. Nighttime scene outside the cabin. Karen stands on the gravel driveway screaming into her phone, pointing at the cabin with rage, while red and blue police lights reflect off the trees. James stands calm on the porch in plain clothes, tall and firm, watching silently. It happened on a stormy Saturday evening, the kind where the sky cracks open with thunder and every shadow feels alive. I was inside the cabin, reading, when I saw those familiar lights flashing through the rain. Police, again. But this time it wasn't just one car. 2 cruisers rolled in, tires crunching gravel, lights painting the woods in red and blue. Karen was right there in the driveway, screaming into her phone, fingers stabbing toward my cabin. "He's a criminal. He's threatening me and my son. Arrest him now!" I stepped onto my porch, hands in plain sight, calm, collected, because deep down, I knew the storm was about to break. Not over me, but over her. The officers got out, hands resting on their belts. Karen rushed to them, ranting, her voice shrill. "He doesn't belong here. He's dangerous. My son saw him sneaking around, and I demand you take him away." The lead officer turned to me. His flashlight beam cut across the rain, landing on my face. For a long moment, he just stared. Then something in his expression shifted. His posture straightened. His jaw tightened. And then, it happened. A uniformed police officer standing in the rain at attention, right hand raised in a crisp salute toward James on the porch. Karen frozen mid-scream, face twisted in shock, while her teenage son stands behind her wide-eyed. The officer took one, stepped forward, squared his shoulders, and snapped his hand to his brow in a sharp salute. "Yes, Major General," he said, his voice cutting through the storm like a blade. Karen froze. The words didn't register at first, not until the second. Officer mirrored the salute, standing at rigid attention before me. Her mouth hung open. Her son's eyes went wide. The entire narrative she'd spun, the lies she'd told, the control she thought she had, it all shattered in an instant. I nodded slowly, returning the gesture with quiet authority. I didn't need to raise my voice. The truth carried more weight than any accusation she could hurl. Karen stumbled backward, color draining from her face. Major General? But he's just some man in a cabin. The lead officer lowered his salute and fixed her with a look colder than the rain pouring around us. Ma'am, this man has given more to this country than you could imagine. You've wasted department time with false reports. Consider this your final warning. Her son shifted uncomfortably, realizing for the first time just how deep his mother's lies had gone. And in that moment, Karen wasn't the one in control anymore. The mask had been ripped away. The world finally saw her for what she was, a petty tyrant, undone by her own arrogance. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to, because sometimes silence is the loudest statement of all. Morning scene. Karen sitting on her porch in disheveled clothes, head in hands, while neighbors in the background whisper and shake their heads. Her teenage son stands apart from her, backpack slung over one shoulder, looking toward James's cabin with conflicted respect. The storm ended that night, but the ripples from it lasted far longer. The very next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. Word spread faster than wildfire. Everyone had seen the flashing lights, and enough people had heard the officer's words to know the truth. I wasn't just some recluse in a cabin. I wasn't a stranger to be feared. I was Major General James Whitmore. Retired, yes, but not forgotten. And Karen. She couldn't show her face without whispers chasing her down. Neighbors who once nodded politely now kept their distance. Some muttered about all the calls she had made, all the times the sheriff's office had been dragged out here for nothing but her paranoia. The more she tried to defend herself, the worse it got. Her voice carried across porches, high and shrill, insisting she'd only been trying to protect the community. But nobody believed her anymore, not after the salute, not after the truth stood taller than her lies. Her son, though, he was different. Quiet. Thoughtful. I'd catch him glancing my way as though the scales had fallen from his eyes. He wasn't blind to what his mother had done anymore. And in the silence between us, I could tell he was searching for something more, a kind of example she could never give him. For weeks, Karen shrank into herself. The clipboard disappeared. The constant accusations stopped. The porch full of plastic flowers grew dusty and neglected. She had built her world on control, and when that collapsed, she had nothing left to stand on. I didn't rejoice in it. I didn't need to. Some victories aren't about parades or medals. They're about watching justice happen naturally, with no need for vengeance. Final reflective scene. James sitting calmly on the porch of his cabin at sunset, wearing his flannel shirt, a steaming mug of coffee in his hand, the forest bathed in golden light. In the distance, the neighbor's son walks down the gravel road, backpack on, heading toward his own future. By the time spring came, the cabin was alive with new growth. The air smelled sweeter. The nights felt quieter. Peace, the kind I had fought for all my life, had returned. Karen stayed in. Her house, her influence gone. And while she never apologized, her silence was enough. Her son, though, every so often, I'd see him walking down the gravel road, shoulders a little straighter, head held higher. I didn't need words to know he'd chosen not to follow her path. Maybe he saw in me something his mother couldn't teach him. Maybe he just realized that strength isn't about control. It's about restraint. Either way, he was free to build his own story, unchained from her bitterness. As for me, I sat on my porch with a mug of coffee, watching the sunset spread gold across the trees. I thought about the salute, the look on Karen's face, the way truth has a way of surfacing when you least expect it, and I realized something. You can fight wars overseas, you can lead men into battle, you can even carry stars on your shoulder. But sometimes the greatest battles are the ones fought in your own backyard, against pettiness, against pride, against the Karens of the world who think they hold the power. But the truth, they never do, because respect isn't demanded, it's earned. And as the sun sank low, I knew one thing for certain. Peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the triumph of truth over lies. That, in the end, was the real victory.